I'm Erica from Bronx, New York,
I'm Meredith from Phoenix, Arizona.
bringing you the latest in news and politics.
Filled with snarky views and pithy commentary.
You're listening to the Two Conservative Lesbians Show. And guys, we are back with an all-new episode, and we've got a lot to cover today because, well, we have the main story, which I think everyone's been talking about this week, which is the attack that can't really say attack really, but ISIS when they burned alive the Jordanian guy, which was pretty horrific stuff.
It was really disturbing. Very disturbing stuff.
And then what became even more disturbing than that, or I guess expected of us at this point, is the silence that came from across the board from this administration in terms of doing what they've been doing lately, which is saying we acknowledge the right of Jordan to defend itself.
Which,
like,
my first question is, why should Jordan care whether we acknowledge that right or not? They're a sovereign state. They can defend themselves and attack ISIS if they want. They didn't need our permission.
Yeah, Jordan is pretty. They're pretty prolific, and they're pretty well known for being really barbaric in terms of their fighting abilities and style. So, ISIS picked. I think they picked the wrong country right now to attack.
Well,
I don't know what they thought was going to happen, but definitely not what's been happening to them. Which is thankfully someone has stepped up, and of course it was Jordan. Shocker, stepped up and has been really attacking them.
right. Well, you should always know better than to attack a country where the king was in the British Air Force, which the British Air Force is kind of terrifying, and also has a tendency to quote Clint Eastwood films when talking about how he's going to kill everybody that's on your side. I mean, he's quoting Clint Eastwood. I have never heard Obama quote Clint Eastwood, and quite frankly, I would die of shock if he ever quoted him.
I was about to say I don't think President Obama has ever seen a Clint Eastwood movie.
There would be
I would wager a bet on that one.
There would just be too much violence for his poor little heart to handle. He would just collapse at all of the non-peaceful resolution going on.
Exactly. But so there was this video, and of course, instead of the mainstream media discussing the horrific um point or what happened to this man on this video of being burned alive, they've turned to discussing how well put together the video was, and that they had several camera angles, and that they must have some really high-tech people in ISIS because they had all these fade-ins and this slow motion takes and everything. And it's like, do they know this is not a Hollywood flick? They do know that the guy was really burned alive, right?
And here's my real question: This is not exactly a real high tech ability. I'm not very good with making videos, to be quite frank, and I could do the same thing with iMovie. So,
Yeah, according to the mainstream media, the big concern here is how they put together this film and not so much what they did in it.
yeah, because
So,
God forbid we talk about how evil ISIS is. That would be, I don't know, racist or something.
did you watch it? I know that you said you've seen the beheadings. I have chosen not to. I know what I can and can't deal with, and I don't. I did not see any of the beheadings. So I can say that I did not see the actual video of this man being burned alive. All I've seen is what they've shown on the news, which is certain images of him engulfed in flames and of him simply standing in that cage. So that's the extent of what I've seen.
Yeah, I've only seen the images. I can handle a beheading. I have a thing about fire though, and that's just like it's actually one of my phobias is being burned or that kind of stuff. It really freaks me out. I have nightmares about it, so I knew that was probably not one of my better options to watch that video. It was too horrific for me to handle.
Which brings up the other issue that a lot of the mainstream media were dealing with right now, especially since the leader of Jordan asked that the video not be shown in order to honor the guy who was burned alive. What do you feel about it? Do you think that it should be played on the news, maybe in the late, in the late night hours so that children wouldn't see it? Or do you think that they should be doing what they're doing now, which is showing, a picture here and there and saying, if you want to see it, we have access for you to see it on our website?
I think it's better to leave it on a website because you honestly never know who is going to, even if you give a warning on the air before showing it, you never know who's going to flip to the station in the middle of watching this video, and that could be an extremely traumatizing thing for someone to watch. I know it would be for me if I flipped to that station and watched that happen. But at the
Yeah,
same
I know that
time,
it would be traumatizing for, like you said, for adults, for children too, but I think even more so for adults, because unfortunately it's a terrible thing to say, but most kids would see something like that and they wouldn't think it's real.
but
Whereas an adult would see it and know that it's real, and it would have a stronger impact if an adult saw it, I think, than if a child saw it.
exactly, I think kids would mostly think it was maybe a scene in a movie or, something like that, but adults are going to put two and two together and know that that's a real person being burned alive. But it is important, I think, for that video to be accessible for people because to see that video is to see even more so than the beheadings how evil and disturbed these people are, and that you can't just give them a pass. You can't just leave a door open for peaceful talk. Somebody who will burn a person alive in a cage, that there is no discussion left to be had with them.
Right. And we do need to realize that this is not someone that we are going to compromise with. This is not someone that we're going to sit down at a table with and try to figure out how to make peace between them and whatever area and land they have forced their way into and taken over. I'm sure that's something that this president would like to do, although he's been saying otherwise lately. But he's someone who talks a big game, but he doesn't actually follow through on anything he says. I mean, this guy, he's turned us into a wuss. The United States is a weak nation right now. He has if he's accomplished anything in his presidency, I think this is the one that he should always be remembered for, is for just how strongly and how swiftly he has crippled us.
Right. Well, and that's exactly why I'm sitting here watching Jordan's response to this. ISIS killed one Jordanian, and they responded immediately with airstrikes. They went over there and they blasted these areas that ISIS has under control. And at last report I saw was something like 55 casualties. They killed at least 55 members of ISIS. They went over and took care of it. They've killed how many American citizens? And how many citizens of our allies? And yet we're just still sitting here doing minimal effort. We're running like maybe 7 bombing missions a day or something like that, and it's, or even less than that maybe. We're not
Well,
really
that's
doing
because that's
anything.
because we're too busy trying to make sure that we appease the Muslims and the Islamic faith, and not make them feel like we're targeting them as if they're the evil that's behind all of this. We're too busy trying to make peace instead of calling evil by its name and acknowledging that this group is evil. We're not saying all of Islam is evil or all Muslims are evil. We are saying that those who are ISIS members, who proclaim to be ISIS members, and who are doing these horrific things are the enemy, and we need to destroy the enemy.
So it's what I find so amusing about this, and amusing in a really disturbing way, is that we spend all this time with our government saying, "Oh, ISIS isn't representative of Islam. Islam isn't really like this. It doesn't teach things like this at all." And for the but we also won't attack ISIS. We won't go all out against them because somehow we think that that would be Islamophobic or something. So there's a double standard, a double talk coming from Washington, which that's not new. of saying that it's not Islamic, but if we attack them, that might be construed as attacking Islam, even though they're not Islamic.
Right. So I wonder what will happen. I mean, we just found out, I think if not today, then yesterday, that in the attacks that Jordan has done against ISIS, that an American female, apparently the last one that the last American that they had as a hostage, was killed in one of the missile attacks from Jordan. And when they announced it, it was really them being thrilled. ISIS was the ones who announced it, and they basically chalked it up to Allah being this all powerful being because it managed to kill this one American, and none of their fighters were harmed in that attack.
And
So it's going to prove their point that they're almighty and all powerful, and we're just dispensable.
right, they think that they can do whatever they want, and that's the real problem, is that whether or not you believe that Islam is a part of their, is actually encouraging this, you have to acknowledge the fact that without Islam, they would not have the impetus to do this. They would be way less apt to start a war without that backing for them. And so they're basing their attacks on religion, whether you believe the religion has anything to do with those attacks or not. That's what they believe, not what we believe.
Right. And, during our afterthought show, we will be discussing what the president had to say about religion at the annual um, prayer breakfast in our afterthought show. So you won't want to miss that because he had a lot to say
And
about
I've
it.
got a lot to say about what he said about it.
And so do I. But we're going to move on now from this Jordan story. And I believe we're now going on to our, the best ever vice president, the best we've ever had. I can't think of a better vice president than Joe Biden at this
Oh,
point.
he's
I'm
totally
drawing blanks. I don't know if there was
the
any
best
in
ever.
history. And
Totally.
I'm going all the way back to, 1776 and all that, and I can't think of one. I mean, that's how far back I'm going, and I've got nothing. I think Joe Biden really kind of sums up what it means to be a vice president. So what wonderful Yoda like things did he have to say now?
Well, apparently, there's a good chance that Boehner and other Democrats are not going to come to Netanyahu's speech. At least that's the rumor, that they are not going to show up. And I'm thinking, when did we elect a bunch of 5-year-olds? Because seriously, we've got a bigger problem here than your slighted egos. That you weren't asked if it was okay if he came to speak, so you're just not going to show up.
Well, I want to know, and I realize as the vice president, like one of the main things that um uh caveats, or one of the main things that you do as vice president, although they don't really, no one ever really does it, is that you're supposed to be the leader of Congress.
Yeah,
I realize
he's the
that.
Senate president.
Right. But can I ask a dumb question though? Who said he was invited? And I'm being very honest about this. Like, I realize that it is his prerogative to go. He doesn't necessarily have to be invited into Congress, unlike the president, who has to be invited. He has like an open ticket, an open key that he could just waltz on in. But honestly, who the hell cares that you're gonna, like you said, have a hissy fit and say, well, I'm not going.
Well,
Okay, your presence would not have been felt if you were there, and it would not be missed if you're not. So okay, big
he's
deal.
supposed to preside over the Senate, so he really should be there for any major thing that's going on in the Senate. That's sort of his job. But the real problem here is the extreme amount of bad press that's going to give us in our, because we're supposed to be the best friends with Israel. They're one of our biggest allies. To not show up to a speech when you're the vice president and the prime minister of Israel is speaking at your place of work is insane. The idea that you would be so childish as to not show up for that speech you do not deserve to be one of the leaders of the free world if you are that childish.
Well, you know that this administration is big about